Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jay McInnes, Sharp Real Estate Group, Oakwin Realty. I come to you live today from newest listing here at the foot of Coquitlam. We are in an 820 square foot penthouse unit, 2-bed, 2-bath, with this expansive west, north, southwest view. Corner unit, we'll get into that at the end. Today, what the government did. So they've just made some very dramatic changes. Is this to supply money for these 4 million homes or whatever it was that they say they're gonna build? I believe it was a home an hour or a home a minute or something like that. Anyway, what they're doing here is altering the mortgage world. We all know I don't like speaking of mortgage side of things because I'm not a mortgage broker, but when this affects, we just don't want the wool pulled over anyone's eyes. So when this affects the people, we need to discuss it. Labeled as the boldest reform in decades, they have just kicked the can down the road yet again, but it doesn't look like that. It's positioned, of course, to help the world, help young Canadians get into that market and just be free of renting. Not quite the case, but we've got some front-end value propositions with some back-end pain, which we just want to highlight today. So, another band-aid solution that the feds have given us here today. So these both come into effect December 15th, so not quite applicable yet. But what is the first one? The first one is 25-year maxed mortgages are now extended to 30-year amortization terms. So what does that look like? So first of all, first-time homebuyers amortization comes into effect on all purchases, old and new. First it was just new, now it's all purchases. And then 30-year mortgages available for all new construction buyers if you are or are not a first-time buyer. And there's a question mark if investors can take advantage of this as well. From everything we've seen, it looks like they can, but we don't have extreme magnified clarity on that yet. So with that, what does it look like? Well, the front end is going to help reduce your monthly payment. This is part of their sales pitch. Ultimately, this will, of course, increase total home ownership, more access for more people. This will help developers and banks get up and running again. We all have seen the stats, specifically that we discussed last week. Sales are down. Sales of brand new are very down. So we need to stimulate. We need to get money out of the banks. We need more liquidity in the world. So we need to get money out of the banks and into the hands of those buyers to give it to either those sellers, but more importantly, those developers. Get the construction moving again, because we all remember they were going to build whatever it was, a home an hour for the next X years, and we're not doing that right now because money is too expensive and buyers are on the fence waiting. So let's take an example. $750,000 mortgage at 25 years at 4.5% with 5-year terms. To make this easy, let's just say the full 25 years you're going to renew 5 times with 5-year terms, of course, and it's consistently 4.5%. I know that's probably not realistic. We're a little bit higher today. We'll be a little bit lower tomorrow, but to pick an even number, that puts you at $4,251.70 a month for that mortgage, just for the loan. So on top of your $750,000 loan, you have interest payments. If you were to ride it the full 25 years, which I know most don't, most won't, but if you were, 1.25 million. So $1.25 million is what that $750,000 purchase turns into, principal, interest, whole term, okay? So you've got $500,000 of interest on top of the $750,000. We've gone into these details before as well, which a lot of people don't dive this far into, but you should, to see what your total life looks like between you and that tight relationship with you and that favorite bank of yours. Now, 30 years, $750,000 loan, same thing, 4.5, 5-year terms. Your fee drops down because we're spreading out the timeline that you have to pay this back. So when we spread, they add, never forget. So the front end benefit of this is $3,887 a month. So that's a savings of $364 a month. Does that really make a difference? Not really, I'm sure. So when they're stretching that out, you get that front end benefit. We're making housing more affordable for you, the little guy, the first time buyer. It's $364 cheaper a month. However, when you extend that amortization an extra 5 years, that brings your total mortgage payment to $618,000. Remember, 25 years, $500,000. Now it's $618,000. So that is added $118,000 to your total purchase, total money and interest going towards that $750,000 loan. So now instead of $1.25 million, which is your total cost of ownership over the term of that 25-year loan, you are now at $1.368 million over the term. So just because it's a few bucks cheaper on the front end, which is all they're focusing on, you're just kicking the can down the road for total debt repay. And for kicking said can, you have a massive downside at the back end of this by way of extending that wee 5 years. So basically for 25-year amortization, jumping to 30, you've got a difference of $117,000 that's costing you in the bigger picture. So that $364 saved a month doesn't look so impressive anymore. So does this actually make sense? Is this actually something you need to jump on? Obviously you don't have to take 30, you can still jump into the market, take 25, take 20. The tighter the better, but this front end value is definitely a minuscule percentage of the big picture. So always look big picture. So most people will say, well, I'm not going to pay the whole property off. I'm just going to sell it and buy up or buy down or whatever that is. And that's fine, but just keep in mind that you are paying less every month. There's also that ratio, principal payback to debt payback for interest payment payback, and that very minuscule front end principal payback. Yes, it does slowly grow, but you don't save or you don't hold the property the whole time and you sell it short. You've still paid less with the 30-year term than the 25 of that principal, meaning that when you do go to sell, the difference is still that much bigger that you have to pay the bank back because those payments of principal have been stretched out and made smaller all the way through. So just remember, when they try and help, they're focusing on one very narrow aspect of the bigger picture. Just look at the bigger picture to make sure this is something of value to you. That's number one. Number two, CMHC capped. So when you were borrowing money, when you were putting a down payment less than 20%, you needed the assistance of the CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Company, I don't remember what it's called, but CMHC comes in, you have 15% down, for example, and you need them, that insured loan, they jump in and they would only do a purchase cap of $1 million. So they would help you if you needed to make up the difference and jump in there to assist bringing you up to that point needed, but would only max out at a $1 million purchase. Now they've bumped that up 50%. So now they'll assist you. You have less than 20% down. They will assist you in purchases up to $1.5 million. So what does this do? This again gains, I won't even say again, because the first one, yes, you're gaining a little bit of leverage, but very little as you saw at the front end. This one is a lot different. Now you've got access for these buyers, first-time buyers, for example, that were really capped at $1 million purchase price when they needed access to that CMHC money. That was the kind of ceiling caveat. Now we've bumped it to $1.5 million. So now all these guys and girls that have deposits less than 20% come to CMHC and they say, we'll pay the difference. This is how it all plays out price-wise. But just so you know now, instead of $1 million price cap, you can go to $1.5 million. So you have $500,000 more buying power, assuming all the numbers work out, of course, at your disposal. So what's that going to do? You have more people can access bigger price points. And as we've seen specifically in the last 5 years of the market, when the money is there and the money is cheap and the money is accessible, people will take it. So they are expanding that, which will again motivate people or hope in their hopes motivate people off the fence. Not only can I buy $1 million property, well, now I can buy $1.5 million. I'm a young family, I've got kids, I need more than $1 million can buy me, and I want to buy in Vancouver or wherever. I can get more, so now I have access. And that access, again, feeds into the market, justifying the purchasing, which again, in theory, will bring the development up when those sales pick up. So these are not structural changes to the market. We got to look at this in two different ways. This gives us a certain segment of the market access, yes, but do we have a problem with the market? The narrative, the government narrative from federal to provincial to municipal, as we've seen in the last handful of years, has been, we have a housing shortage, we have a housing crisis, we have issues, focus, what are we gonna do? So these are band-aids to get people in, but the structural issue of, if those things are true, housing shortage, housing availability are limited, where's the problem lie and how do we fix that? Do we just give people more debt and bring them in like these two new aspects are highlighting and allowing them to do, or are we changing the structure of the problem? So I say these are band-aids because they're not changing the problem, they're just allowing more people to accumulate more debt to get in. But what are the, we have to then break that down. We're not going to go too much into this because we have in the past. But what are the structural problems? If we do have a housing shortage, why do we have a housing shortage and how do we fix that? Well, it's a numbers game. So where are the numbers coming from? That big bad word, immigration. So under the current government, since 2015, they've brought in between 2.5 and 3 million new Canadians. Those people need places to stay. So when they come in, some are rich, some are poor, some need social housing, some have millions. Where are they staying? Well, typically they will get placed somewhere in the country, and then after 12 months, they will go to either Vancouver or Toronto for the most part. And now you have housing shortages in these areas. So how do you stop that? You stop immigration. Well, why don't they do that? Fear of being called racist, xenophobia, all these new tag words which pinpoint that one act of throttling new people coming in, limiting outside people to the Canadian way. That's all fine, it all makes sense, bring them in, they're not gonna kick anyone out, throttle the immigration, but the reason that is not stopping is because the current narrative at a federal level is more the better, and then they layer in entry-level jobs. We need these jobs serviced, so on and so forth. We're not going to get too deep into it, but how do you stop it? Stopping it from that level, which is the most fundamental level. If there's a housing shortage, it makes sense not to add more people. There's very bad insults that come with that decision, so they don't touch it. Money laundering. Remember way back 2018, 2019, when there was this massive, the Vancouver job, there was this massive money laundering issue. Whatever happened to those homes? Because if I buy this home for $2 million and I'm a money launderer and that was fake money, and my neighbor then lists with that as the benchmark and he sells, you're using these fake sales as benchmarks and it integrates into the market and then continues the market going so ridiculously as we saw. So they said that only increased the market 5%, which I think is complete bullshit. But anyway, just some tags from news clippings back then, 2018, the triads laundered $7.4 billion Canadian into the city of Vancouver, according to provincial government figures. Of that, the criminals invested $6 billion Canadian into real estate alone, which has increased the cost of homes in Vancouver by 5%. BS. Overall, some homes were seized and sold by the government. Many remain tied up in legal proceedings for years. The crackdown helped expose vulnerabilities in the real estate market and prompted for reform aimed at curbing illicit money flows into the housing sector. So reforms, us realtors have to get you buyers and sellers to sign a bunch more paperwork. That's a band-aid. That doesn't fix the structure of what took place there. How do you fix that? I do not know. You can't pull those comps out that the rest of the market climbing was built on. I understand that, but something down those lines would assist in fixing the structure. Low rates for longer periods of time, of course, more access to money, as we saw, will pull COVID out of that and those 1% rates, but the rates had continuously come down for the past at least 10 years. Money's easier to access, real estate is easier to access, the prices go up. Why did they keep it down for so long? If they have such an issue with pricing, why are they bringing the rates back down now? Well, it's hurting people in many ways. Of course it is, but the first effect is the variable rate holders of mortgages. Yes, it takes 18 months, they say, to infiltrate the rates into all aspects of the world that we live day to day, which we're still feeling, of course, but the first line of defense is those variable rate holders. So when that gets cheaper, people see it's easier for me to afford, take the money, and go out. And of course, many layers of red tape, as we've discussed countless times, from all levels, federal, municipal, provincial, on building new. 30% of every new home built is taxes and red tape. Why don't they bring the taxes down for development? Why don't they cut the red tape? What they're doing is leaving that because they want their tax dollars, their tax base, and they're adding more debt burden onto the buyer. So all these things, you can either structurally fix something or you can band-aid over it. Surprisingly enough, there's an election coming up, and this is what it looks like to indirectly buy votes for said election coming up, in my narrowest of humble opinions. So is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing that they've done this? They're adding more liquidity to the world as we know it via the banks for loans, for real estate. They're adding more flexibility to that money in hopes that people are going to rush in and grab it and go out and deploy to the dying developers of the world. But again, is it a good thing structurally? Nothing has changed. It is a band-aid that may look great on the surface, but you dig in 1 or 2 layers of the onion and it doesn't look so great anymore. Always look at the big picture when they tell you, look at this shiny thing, it's going to help you achieve your dreams. Till next time.